Daniel Penny, a former Marine that ended up placing a homeless man in a rear naked choke due to the fact that he was making death threats to passengers on a subway in New York City. Now, after a lengthy trial, Daniel was ultimately found innocent. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go over the details of the case, but instead I want to talk about what this case means ultimately for self-defense and our abilities to ultimately protect ourselves. In short, you can protect yourself in the name of self-defense and legally be just fine. Yet at the same exact time, you can protect yourself in self-defense and be completely screwed by the system. Now, obviously, there are going to be a lot of other factors that come into play to determine whether or not you would be found innocent or guilty, but let's just look at the bigger picture. When it comes to fighting and ultimately just self-defense and protecting yourself in general, you need to be absolutely positive that getting hands-on with someone who poses a threat is the only option that you have. Because the moment you go hands-on with someone, there are going to be consequences to some extent. Now, the same goes for intervening in a fight, whether it is to break up others that may be fighting, or in a case like this, stepping in because you see that somebody poses a threat to others around you. Now, I've made my opinion on intervening in fights very clear on this channel, and I stand by it. I simply will not intervene, or at least it's going to take a lot for me to intervene. Now, does that make me a bad person? No, although I'm sure there are some people out there who would think otherwise. I just understand that there are risks involved, both legally and physically, and at the end of the day, I have a wife and child to get home to, and if something happens to me as a result of intervening in something that has absolutely nothing to do with me in the first place, well, that's not going to go over too well. But I know that by intervening, I am putting myself at risk for physical harm. There are countless variables that I just simply cannot account for, and ultimately, there will be legal consequences to some extent. Now, the exact same thing goes for ultimately just defending yourself. If you have an opportunity to walk away and you decide to engage, there's a good chance that a jury is not going to view that as self-defense because of the fact that you quote-unquote had an escape and decided not to take it, but instead engage in a fight that you ultimately, I guess, could have avoided. Now, in general, when it comes to self-defense, I highly suggest avoiding the fight at all costs if possible. Remove yourself from the location if possible. So, for instance, in this situation, did Daniel have an opportunity to essentially move cars, switch cars, and just remove himself from that area where this gentleman was making all these threats? If possible, de-escalate the situation to the best of your ability, and then, as I said, we go hands-on if we have absolutely no other choice. That being said, if you do decide to go hands-on, you better know what you're doing, because if you take things too far on one end, you're going to be crucified in court. And on the other end, if you don't know what you're doing and the other person has even just a slight idea of what they're doing, you might find yourself being more of a victim than a hero. Now, Daniel has made it very clear in interviews post-trial that he is not the type of person to walk away if he feels that others are in danger. And he stated that he would not be able to live with himself if somebody got hurt as a result of him not intervening.
The guilt I would have felt if someone did get hurt, if he did do what he was threatening to do, would never be able to live with myself. And I'll take 1 million court appearances and people calling me names and people hating me just to keep one of those people from getting hurt or killed.
Now, ultimately, when it comes to Daniel in this situation, yes, he was deemed innocent, but he has spent the past year and change in court. He has racked up thousands in legal fees, I have no doubt. His name has been smeared by a variety of groups of individuals, and ultimately he has to live with the fact that he took a man's life as a result of him applying this rear naked choke, or at least, I guess, partially. I guess there's still question on whether or not the choke was the ultimate killer in the situation or not, but nonetheless, he had a part in this man passing away, and he has to live with that nonetheless. Regardless, at the end of the day, there are always going to be consequences to fighting, to self-defense, to intervening in a fight, both good and bad. In this case, just highlights that. I encourage you to really consider the risks before engaging in a fight, both legally and physically. In my opinion, it's just not worth it. There's really not much about fights that are worth the consequences that could come out of it. Because again, you really don't know where things are going to land, especially if they go to court. You could be off scotch-free, or you could be spending the rest of your life behind bars. It's really a crapshoot. Now, going back to how Daniel intervened, I don't know the extent of his training other than the fact that he was an ex-Marine. I'll be honest, anyone that's watched a UFC fight knows how to slap on a rear naked choke. Now, what I want to demonstrate on the mats here in a moment is what I would have done in this situation from a physical standpoint, or not even saying that, what a trained fighter could have done. Somebody that has had extensive training in grappling or striking, what they could have done in the situation to not only control the individual, but control them without the need to apply a choke, or at least apply a choke for that extended period of time. So let's just talk about a couple options from this position, right? And this is where I want to really emphasize, if you have proper training and you know how to, and again, clearly Daniel knows how to apply rear naked choke. I don't think it takes a lot to know how to do that. Anyone that watches UFC knows how to do it. The difference is, though, a trained person is going to know when that choke has taken effect. They're going to know when to release, but more importantly, they also understand that they don't need to necessarily put a chokehold on someone, and instead they can take position. So if we're just focusing on the actual choke itself, right? We get off to the side like this. I work a rear naked choke, however you want to set it up, okay? Two options that I would suggest to do in a situation like that where I don't want to risk long-term damage or potentially taking, Luis's life in the situation is, one, I'm going to commit to the choke. I'm going to squeeze. The moment I feel him pass out, I'm going to immediately release the choke. But instead of just kind of hanging out here, I would switch back to like a seatbelt grip, and I would just hang out in this position. Now, typically when you put somebody to sleep, they're going to go completely limp. After a few seconds, they're going to kind of pop to, and it essentially just resets their body. Now, when I'm holding on to the seatbelt grip here, when I feel them come to, if they're kind of calm, collective, and whatever, and just kind of trying to realize what the hell just happened to them, I'm still in a good position here where they can't really do that much from here. However, if I feel like they start getting hands-on right away, if they start getting aggressive again, then right away I can slip right back into the choke, put them back to sleep, and we just rinse and repeat that process. But more the important detail to understand is I'm not just going to squeeze, Luis goes to sleep, and then I just sit here and continue squeezing. That's not something that a trained person would ideally do in those situations. They're going to put you to sleep and then right away just kind of control the scenario. Now, the second option, if you do want to kind of maintain a choking position and not lose that, is, again, I'm going to squeeze. I can squeeze until they fully go to sleep, and the moment he passes out, I relieve the choke altogether, but keep my hands kind of in a position, but I'm not applying any pressure. And then again, they come to, they start getting hands-on again, I can immediately reapply the choke. The other option is we can kind of do a bit of a pulsing method, meaning that I'm going to squeeze until I feel like they're starting to go to sleep, and then I'm going to let go. And again, I can kind of switch it to a seatbelt grip, or I just completely relieve the pressure a little bit, maybe just kind of keep my hands up high like this. The moment I feel them come back, and again, they start getting antsy and fighting, I right away reapply the pressure. So those are just a couple options if we're still focused on actually applying the choke itself. I can commit to the choke, put them to sleep, and then just take a more of a controlled position, or we just pulse the choke and we just kind of keep them dazed and confused a little bit. Now, the better option, and something that I probably would have done in the situation, is if I ended up in this chokehold, maybe I started to apply this pressure to the point where, okay, I felt like the person's going to sleep, I would release the choke and I would look to get to a top position where then I can just get hands-on, control the person, and I don't have to put any submissions or pain compliance on there. So again, I put the choke, he starts to calm down a little bit. I'm going to use that as an opportunity to switch back to my seatbelt position so I can kind of get high up on this armpit right here. I would clear that bottom hook. Now again, most people aren't going to know to escape off that side, so I'm going to help him. I'm going to start kind of tossing his hips, and I'm going to keep this pressure behind his shoulder as I kind of look to climb up. And again, what I want to focus on is getting a good seatbelt grip, pressuring in a little bit so that they can't turn back into me, because most people, again, that are inexperienced are going to want to face you. They're going to want to square up to me. So he's going to be trying to drive into me. That's fine. I'm going to keep this pressure. I would look to step under, sink my hips down. Ideally, if I can get this top arm, I can apply into some form of gift wrap. If I'm able to trap both arms in this process, beautiful. I can literally just chill here, apply this pressure. I'm not choking him. It might be uncomfortable on his face, but I'm not applying any chokes whatsoever. I've also got my leg up against her waist, so if he did have a weapon, it's difficult for him to access it. I could also feel it, get hands on if I need to, toss a weapon to the side, but I'm in a good position. I can watch all around me, and more importantly, if I need to pop up and get to my feet, I can. Now, even if I don't have this hand, as long as I have the gift wrap arm, again, I can still crank up on it. If he starts trying to get hands on or do anything, this is as easy as just kind of posting it straight down on the ground. So again, there's really not much that he can do from here that's going to really threaten myself or anyone else. Now, if from this position he feels the need to start kind of going belly down, well, then I can kind of follow him through and go ahead, go belly down, and transition kind of like a knee on lower back, right? And again, I'm just going to continue to maintain the gift wrap grip, continue to grab this arm if possible, so that again he can't like shrivel and hide his arms. And I can just kind of sit here and control his position. And again, I can pop back up to my feet if needed. Now the other option that we have, now this could be either from this gift wrap position and he turns to his back, or when I get to this position altogether, I can actually just look to step and come all the way over to mount. And then once we're in mount, I can kind of control this one of two ways. I can either look to fully kind of scoop the head and the arms, and again, just chill in this position. Now, I wouldn't always recommend this in the street. However, in this specific instance, it looked like he had more bystanders that were jumping in to actually help out with the scenario rather than trying to jump in and attack Daniel. So he probably could have gone away from just hanging out in this mount position like this without having to worry about somebody hurting him. The other option that we have, instead of scooping the arms and the head, is actually just kind of posting on the arms here as well. He can bump me, he can drive all he wants, but again, if I'm in a good position and this guy doesn't really have a lot of grappling experience, I should be able to hang out here. At the very minimal, I can post, put all my weight, and transition again to kind of like a knee on belly, and I can post out to the side here as well. And once again, we're just kind of controlling the scenario. So it's important to understand, and as I mentioned at the beginning, this case just glorified how dangerous it is to intervene in fights to begin with, but also just how dangerous it is to get into a fight, because even if you're doing the right thing, you're still going to end up in court. You're still going to have legal fees to deal with. You're going to have consequences of some sort. It could have gone better for Daniel to maybe just get hands-on and control this person to where, again, he can't harm anyone else, but Daniel doesn't fall onto the risk of actually harming this person in the process or ultimately taking his life, which is what happened. So all the way from the beginning, one more time, if I take the guys back and we start kind of applying the chokehold again, I can commit to the choke the moment he goes to sleep. I let go to relieve the pressure, and I just secure a good position. And honestly, what you could do from there as well is once I do put him to sleep, I could use that opportunity to transition and get to a better position to where now when he wakes up, he's completely tied up, has no idea what happened. And again, he's not in a position to where he can harm anyone else. So just a few options. And again, this is why I emphasize train, learn how to fight a little bit, so that if you find yourselves in situations like this, you don't take things too far, and ultimately you can choose better, non-violent, less lethal options to control and subdue somebody. Stay safe.